I never imagined my own son would tell me to move out of my house. After everything I sacrificed for Brandon, his words cut deeper than any knife. When he said, "Move out, I'm done with you," something inside me broke, so I made a decision. I sold the house without telling anyone and disappeared. 3 days later, I was in Monaco, sipping champagne on a private balcony overlooking the Mediterranean. His calls poured in when he saw the sold sign. I let them ring. Let me back up a bit. My name is Lyle, and at 65 years old, I thought I understood the rhythm of life. I lost my wife, Carol, to cancer 7 years ago, and since then, the world has felt slightly off balance. Carol and I were high school sweethearts, married for 38 years. She was the love of my life, my compass, my home. When we had Brandon, our only child, we centered our universe around him. I worked as a financial advisor during the day and took night shifts at a local warehouse to ensure he had every advantage. Carol and I lived modestly, putting aside money for his college fund, for his future. We drove the same cars for 15 years. We rarely took vacations. Everything was for Brandon. I remember the countless baseball games I attended, standing in the rain with my umbrella, cheering him on even when his team lost by 20 runs. I remember helping him with calculus homework until 2 in the morning, both of us bleary-eyed but determined. I remember working overtime for months to afford the computer he needed for his graphic design projects in high school. "Dad, you work too hard," Brandon would sometimes say, and I would ruffle his hair and tell him, "Nothing is too hard when it comes to you, son." Through careful investing and disciplined saving, I built a comfortable life for us. Our home in the suburbs of Philadelphia wasn't extravagant, but it was spacious, paid off, and filled with memories. 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, a beautiful yard where Brandon learned to ride a bike, and later, where he proposed to his wife Heather under the oak tree Carol and I had planted when we first moved in. When Carol got sick, everything changed. The doctors gave her 6 months, but my Carol fought for 2 years. Brandon was just starting his career then, and while he visited when he could, I was her primary caretaker. I held her hand through chemo treatments, cleaned up when she was sick, and laid beside her every night, memorizing the sound of her breathing, terrified of the silence that would eventually come. After she passed, Brandon and I drifted. His calls became less frequent, his visits shorter. I understood he had his own life, his own growing family. Heather gave birth to their first child, my granddaughter Lily, followed 2 years later by my grandson Jack. I treasured every moment with those kids, seeing echoes of Brandon, of Carol, in their smiles. 3 years ago, Brandon called me with news that shocked me. He had been laid off from his job at a marketing firm, and they were struggling to make mortgage payments. "Dad, I hate to ask this," he said, voice tight with embarrassment, "but would it be possible for us to stay with you for a few months, just until I find something new?" "Son, you don't ever have to ask," I told him immediately. "This is your home too." They moved in the following weekend, and I was secretly thrilled. My big house had been too quiet since Carol died. Having the patter of little feet, the chaos of family dinners, the laughter of my grandchildren filled a void I hadn't realized was there. "Dad, I hate to ask this," he said, voice tight with embarrassment, "but would it be possible for us to stay with you for a few months, just until I find something new?" For the first year, things were wonderful. Brandon found a new job at a financial services company, ironically similar to where I had worked before retiring. He started at a modest salary but showed promise. I helped with the grandkids whenever Heather needed a break, took them to the park, taught Jack how to throw a ball, just as I had taught his father. I converted my home office into a playroom for the kids. I gave Brandon and Heather the master bedroom since they needed the space, and I moved into the smaller guest room. It was a small sacrifice that I made gladly. But then something changed. Brandon came home one evening practically buzzing with excitement. His company had promoted him to manage their high-net-worth clients, people with investment portfolios worth millions. The salary increase was substantial, and there would be bonuses based on performance. I was proud of him, of course. But something in his expression gave me pause. There was a hunger there, a sharp edge of ambition that seemed to transform his features subtly. I dismissed my concerns as the worries of an old man, but that night marked the beginning of a change I couldn't have predicted. Little did I know that my son's promotion wasn't just a career advancement. It was the twist that would begin to unravel our relationship, setting us on a collision course that would eventually lead to the words I never thought I'd hear from my own flesh and blood. The changes in Brandon were subtle at first. He started coming home later, often smelling of expensive scotch, and wearing a confidence that bordered on arrogance. His clothes changed too. Gone were the modest button-downs and slacks, replaced by tailored suits and designer watches I knew were well outside his previous budget. "You're looking sharp, son," I commented one evening, as he breezed through the door at 9:30. "Image is everything in my business, Dad," he replied without slowing down. "These clients expect a certain presentation." Heather began to change, too. Her trips to the salon became more frequent, her wardrobe more expensive. She started a book club, but from the snippets of conversation I overheard, it seemed less about literature and more about networking with the wives of Brandon's clients and colleagues. Our family dinners, which had once been a daily occurrence, dwindled to once or twice a week. And even then, Brandon was often distracted, checking his phone under the table. Plans we made to take the kids fishing or to the museum were canceled at the last minute because a client needed something or there was a networking event they couldn't miss. "Rain check, Dad," became Brandon's catchphrase, accompanied by a pat on my shoulder that felt increasingly patronizing. One Saturday morning, I was making pancakes for Lily and Jack, something that had become our weekend tradition. "Grandpa, can we use chocolate chips today?" Lily asked, her front tooth newly missing. "Of course, sweetheart. Chocolate chip pancakes coming right up." Heather walked in, dressed for a day out, her hair freshly styled. "Oh, Lyle, we're actually taking the kids to brunch at the Clayton Club. Brandon's meeting some important colleagues there." "But Grandpa's making chocolate chip pancakes," Jack protested. "Of course, sweetheart. Chocolate chip pancakes coming right up." The kids were ushered away, their disappointed glances back at me making my heart ache. I stood alone in the kitchen, a bowl of pancake batter in my hands, feeling suddenly unnecessary. The incidents piled up. I'd find my belongings moved without explanation. The armchair where I liked to read the newspaper was replaced with something sleeker that hurt my back. The fishing trophies and family photos that had lined the mantel were rearranged, with several of my favorites missing entirely. "Where's the photo of Carol and me at Niagara Falls?" I asked one evening, noticing its absence. "Oh, we were updating the look," Heather explained smoothly. "All those old silver frames didn't match the new aesthetic. I've put them away safely." Away. As if my memories, my life with Carol, were cluttered to be stored. I tried talking to Brandon about how I was feeling, catching him one rare evening when he was home before 9. "Son, I feel like things are changing around here, and I'm not being consulted." Brandon glanced up from his laptop. "What do you mean?" "My things being moved, plans with the kids being canceled. I feel like I'm becoming invisible in my own home." Brandon sighed, closing his laptop. "Dad, you're being sensitive. We're just trying to update things a bit. This place was starting to look dated, and I need to be able to invite colleagues over without feeling embarrassed." "Embarrassed?" The word stung. "Of the home you grew up in? That was a long time ago. Look, Heather has a good eye for these things. Just trust her judgment, okay? We're making improvements." Improvements. As if my home, the home Carol and I had lovingly maintained for decades, was some kind of fixer-upper project. A few weeks later, I came downstairs to find a man measuring the living room walls. Blueprints were spread across the coffee table. "What's going on?" I asked. Heather looked up brightly. "Oh, we're just getting some quotes for the renovation. We're thinking of opening up this wall to create more flow, and updating the kitchen with marble countertops." "Renovation? This is the first I'm hearing about it." "Brandon meant to tell you," she said dismissively. "It's going to be gorgeous when it's done. So much more modern." I felt a chill run through me. No one had asked my permission to renovate my home. They were making plans as if I wasn't there, as if my opinion didn't matter. But I swallowed my protest, not wanting to create conflict. After all, they were family, and I told myself they meant well. But the final straw came when I was organizing some papers in the desk of my small bedroom. I accidentally knocked over a folder of Brandon's that had been placed there. As I gathered the scattered papers, my eye caught a legal document with my name on it. Curious, I read it, and my blood ran cold. It was a consultation with a lawyer about adverse possession laws in Pennsylvania. Brandon had been exploring whether, after living in my home for a certain period, he could claim legal ownership. There were notes in the margins about how to document his continuous and hostile possession of the property. My hands trembled as I read the lawyer's response, which fortunately indicated that such a claim would be difficult, given that I had invited them to live there and was still in residence. But the fact that my son had even investigated this possibility shook me to my core. That night, I barely slept, the betrayal burning in my chest like acid. The son I'd sacrificed everything for was plotting to take my home from me through legal trickery. I felt like I was living with strangers, people wearing the faces of my family but with hearts I no longer recognized. It was the first twist in what would become a spiral of betrayal, one that forced me to see the harsh reality of my situation. The comfortable family arrangement I thought we had was an illusion. In Brandon's eyes, I was no longer the father who had given everything for him. I was an obstacle to the new life he was building, a relic to be moved aside. The betrayals continued to mount with increasing boldness. One Sunday afternoon, I returned from a walk to find unfamiliar voices in the living room. Heather was giving a tour of the house to an older couple I didn't recognize. "And this will be the formal dining room once we knock down this wall," she was saying, gesturing grandly. "Heather?" I said, stepping into view. She startled slightly, then recovered with a practiced smile. "Oh, Lyle, I'd like you to meet my parents, Richard and Diane. Mom, Dad, this is Brandon's father." The introduction stung. Not Lyle, who owns this home, but Brandon's father, as if that were my only relevant identity. Her parents offered cool handshakes and tight smiles. "Lovely home you have," Richard said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Thank you," I replied. "Carol and I bought it 30 years ago." "Well, it certainly has potential," Diane said, eyeing the wallpaper Carol had chosen with obvious distaste. Heather quickly steered them toward the kitchen, continuing her tour as if I were invisible. I stood there in my own living room, feeling like an unwelcome guest. Later that week, I went down to the basement to find some old photo albums. I had been feeling nostalgic for Carol, for the life we'd built. To my shock, I found dozens of boxes labeled Lyle's Things stacked against the wall. Inside were my books, my fishing gear, the model ships I'd built with Brandon when he was a boy, and most upsettingly, the family photographs that had once hung throughout the house. I carried one of the boxes upstairs, finding Brandon in his home office, formerly my study. The oak desk where I'd paid bills and helped Brandon with homework had been replaced by a glass and chrome monstrosity. "What is this?" I asked, setting the box down with a thud. Brandon glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. "Dad, I'm on a call. Can this wait?" "No, it can't. Why are my things packed away in the basement?" He sighed, muting his call. "We're getting ready for the renovation, remember? The contractor starts next week. Besides, most of that stuff was just collecting dust. Those are my memories, Brandon. My life. You had no right to pack them away without asking me." "Dad, you're overreacting. It's just stuff, and honestly, most of it is outdated. We need to make this place presentable." Before I could respond, he unmuted his call and swiveled his chair away from me, effectively dismissing me from what had once been my own study. That weekend, Brandon and Heather hosted a neighborhood barbecue in the backyard. I offered to help, but was told everything was handled. I found myself relegated to the sidelines, watching as Brandon played host in my home, introducing himself to my longtime neighbors as if he were the homeowner. "We're planning a complete overhaul of the landscaping," he told Mrs. Peterson, who had lived next door for 20 years. "The current setup is so old-fashioned." "Oh, but Lyle and Carol's garden has always been the highlight of the block," Mrs. Peterson said, looking confused. "Well, times change," Brandon replied smoothly. "We're thinking of something more contemporary." I walked away, unable to bear any more. Inside the house, I found my friend Thomas, a retired lawyer who had been my confidant since college. He had been watching the interactions with a furrowed brow. "Everything okay, Lyle?" he asked quietly. "No," I admitted for the first time. "No, it's not." Over the next week, Thomas and I met several times for coffee at a diner away from the house. I confided everything. The renovations planned without my input. My things being packed away. The document about adverse possession. "This isn't right, Lyle," Thomas said, his legal mind clearly troubled. "Have you considered what your options are?" "They're my family, Thomas. What am I supposed to do, kick them out?" "No, but you need to protect yourself. Let me help you get your affairs in order, just in case." With Thomas's guidance, I began discreetly documenting my assets, updating my will, and ensuring my financial records were in order. It felt paranoid, but Thomas insisted it was prudent. Then came a health scare that revealed the true depth of the change in my son. I experienced severe chest pains while alone in the house and called an ambulance. From the hospital, I called Brandon, who was at work. "Dad, I'm in the middle of a critical meeting," he said, sounding impatient. "Is it serious?" "They're running tests," I said. The hospital sounds beeping in the background. "The doctor mentioned possible angina." "Okay, well, let me know what they say. I really can't get away right now." He hung up before I could respond. I sat alone in the emergency room for 4 hours. The tests eventually came back negative, a false alarm, but Brandon never showed up. When I returned home that evening, he barely looked up from his laptop. "Everything okay?" he asked perfunctorily. "Just stress, apparently," I replied, waiting for some sign of concern. "That's good," he said, already refocused on his screen. "By the way, we're having the Richardsons over for dinner tomorrow. Heather would appreciate it if you could eat in your room." Richard is a potential major client. I stood there, staring at my son, a stranger in an expensive suit who couldn't be bothered to visit his father in the hospital, who was now asking me to make myself invisible in my own home. "No," I said quietly. Brandon looked up, surprised. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I won't eat in my room like a child being punished. This is my home, Brandon." His expression hardened. "Dad, you're being difficult. This dinner is important for my career." "And I'm not important?" The words hung in the air between us. Brandon's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, already dismissing our conversation. "We'll talk about this later." But we never did. The dinner happened, and I made myself scarce. Not out of obedience, but because I couldn't bear to watch my son fawn over these strangers in my home while treating me like an inconvenience. The final blow came when my sister called from Arizona. We spoke weekly, and this time, she sounded hesitant. "Lyle, is everything okay with you?" Brandon called me, and he's concerned. "Concerned about what?" "He says you've been acting erratic, forgetful, that you got angry about some boxes being moved to the basement. He mentioned you might be showing early signs of cognitive decline." My blood ran cold. "That's not true, Sarah. He's lying to you." "He said you'd say that," she replied, her voice uncertain. "He's talking about having you evaluated. He's worried about your ability to make decisions." After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. My son wasn't just trying to push me aside. He was actively working to undermine me, to paint me as incompetent. And I realized, with growing horror, that he had been going through my financial statements. The most recent one had been moved from where I kept it, and when I checked my desk, I found a notepad with Brandon's handwriting, listing my various accounts and their balances. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about everything I had built over a lifetime, and the son I had sacrificed everything for was methodically working to take it all away from me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Brandon wasn't just inconsiderate or caught up in his new lifestyle. He was deliberately, systematically betraying me. The boy I had raised, the man I thought I knew, had become someone capable of plotting against his own father. It was a betrayal so profound that it altered everything I thought I understood about family, about love, about the life I had built. The confrontation that changed everything happened on a Friday evening in late September. Brandon's in-laws, Richard and Diane, were coming to stay for the weekend to attend a charity gala where Brandon was hoping to network with potential clients. Heather had been preparing for days, cleaning obsessively, and ordering fresh flowers for every room. I was reading in the living room when Heather approached, looking uncomfortable. "Lyle," she began, her voice falsely bright. "I wanted to talk to you about the sleeping arrangements for this weekend. My parents will be arriving tomorrow." "I remember," I said, putting down my book. "I made sure to clean the guest room for them yesterday." She fidgeted with her bracelet, not meeting my eyes. "The thing is, the guest room is a bit small for both of them. We were thinking they could use your bedroom, since it has the ensuite bathroom. You wouldn't mind taking the couch in the basement for just 2 nights, would you? It would really help us out." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. My bedroom was the smallest in the house, the one I had moved into, so they could have the master suite. And now, they wanted to displace me entirely, banish me to a basement couch in my own home. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not sleeping on the couch. Your parents can use the guest room, or if that's too small, perhaps they should stay at a hotel." Heather's pleasant facade cracked. "A hotel? Do you know how that would look? Brandon needs to make a good impression. I'm sorry, but I'm not giving up my bedroom. I've already given up enough." She stormed off, and I knew the matter wasn't settled. Sure enough, Brandon came home early that day, his expression thunderous as he strode into the living room. "What's this about you refusing to let Heather's parents use your room?" he demanded without preamble. "Hello to you too, son," I said calmly. "And yes, I'm not sleeping on a basement couch at my age. It's 2 nights, Dad. 2 nights to help my career. Is that really too much to ask after all we've done for you?" The unfairness of his statement made me laugh, a short, bitter sound. "All you've done for me? In my house? The house I paid for? That you moved into when you were in trouble?" Brandon's face flushed. "We've been taking care of you for 3 years. Cooking, cleaning, maintaining this place while you sit around doing nothing." "Taking care of me?" I stood up slowly, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. I was perfectly fine before you moved in. I cooked my own meals, cleaned my own house, lived my own life. I welcomed you because you needed help, not because I did. That's not how Heather sees it, Brandon shot back. She's been working herself to the bone trying to make this place livable while managing your increasing needs. My increasing needs? I repeated incredulously. What needs would those be, exactly? The need to be consulted about renovations to my own home? The need to not have my possessions packed away without my permission? The need to not be treated like an unwanted houseguest? You're being selfish and ungrateful, Brandon shouted, his composure finally breaking. We've put our lives on hold living in this outdated house, dealing with your set ways and your refusal to adapt to change. Put your lives on hold? I was shouting now too, years of suppressed frustration boiling over. You moved into my home because you couldn't afford your own. I gave you the master bedroom, converted my office for your children, rearranged my entire life to accommodate your family. And how have you repaid that generosity? By gradually pushing me out of my own home, by going behind my back to consult lawyers about taking my house, by telling family members I'm losing my mind. Brandon faltered for a moment, shocked that I knew about the calls to my sister, about the legal consultation, but he recovered quickly. You're twisting everything, making yourself the victim, when we're just trying to help you transition into a more appropriate living situation for someone your age. A more appropriate situation? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet now. Like what, exactly? There are very nice assisted living communities, he said, the words clearly rehearsed. Places where you'd have people your own age, activities, medical care if you need it. You'd be happier there, Dad. This house is too much for you to manage alone. I'm not alone, Brandon. I have a son and grandchildren. Or at least, I thought I did. The pain in my chest was physical now, a crushing weight of betrayal. Do you even hear yourself? Trying to ship me off to a home so you can have my house? Heather had entered the room at some point, the children hovering uncertainly behind her. Their little faces were frightened by the shouting, and I immediately regretted letting things escalate in front of them. It's not like that, Brandon insisted, though his eyes said otherwise. We're thinking of what's best for everyone. Best for everyone? Or best for you? I asked quietly. You know what? Brandon's voice rose again, his control slipping. I'm done trying to reason with you. You've become bitter and difficult, and I'm tired of walking on eggshells in my own home. Your home? The audacity took my breath away. This is not your home, Brandon. This is my home, which I generously allowed you to live in when you had nowhere else to go. Well, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to go, he shouted, the words echoing in the sudden silence of the room. Move out, Dad. I'm done with you. The moment the words left his mouth, I saw a flicker of shock in his own eyes, as if he couldn't believe what he'd said, but he didn't take it back. Instead, he stood there, breathing hard, his face flushed with anger. Lily began to cry, a soft, confused sound that broke the tension. Jack looked between his father and me, his small face crumpled in distress. Grandpa? He said in a small voice. Are you leaving? I knelt down to his level, ignoring the pain in my knees, ignoring Brandon and Heather entirely. Don't you worry about adult problems, buddy. Grandpa loves you very much, no matter what. When I stood up again, I looked directly at Brandon. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply nodded once, the calm of absolute clarity washing over me. I heard you, I said quietly, loud and clear. I walked past him to my room, closing the door softly behind me. Inside, alone, I sat on the edge of my bed and let the full impact of what had just happened wash over me. My own son had told me to move out of my house, the house where I'd raised him, where I'd cared for his mother as she died, where every corner held memories of the life we'd built. In that moment of profound hurt, something shifted inside me. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but alongside it grew a sense of resolve. If Brandon wanted me gone, then gone I would be, but on my terms, not his. For the first time in years, I felt a clarity of purpose that had been missing since Carol died. The next morning, everyone acted as if nothing had happened. Brandon left early for work. Heather was coolly civil, asking if I wanted coffee as she prepared breakfast for the children. The confrontation hung in the air, unacknowledged but impossible to ignore. I smiled at my grandchildren, helped Jack tie his shoes, kissed Lily's forehead, as I always did. But inside, the wheels were already turning, a plan taking shape that would change all of our lives forever. Brandon had shown his hand, revealed the true nature of his feelings toward me. Now it was my turn to act, and I would do so with a decisiveness that would leave him reeling. The son who thought he could push me aside, was about to learn that the father he had underestimated still had one final lesson to teach him. The morning after Brandon told me to move out, I called Thomas and asked to meet him for lunch. We sat in a quiet corner of a restaurant downtown, far from any chance of running into Brandon or his colleagues. "He actually said that to you? Move out? I'm done with you?" Thomas asked. His fork paused midway to his mouth. "Those exact words," I confirmed, the phrase still raw in my memory. Thomas put down his fork, his expression a mixture of anger and concern. "Lyle, this is elder abuse. Emotional, if not financial. We could take legal action." I shook my head. "I don't want a protracted legal battle with my own son, Thomas. I don't want to drag my grandchildren through that kind of ugliness." "Then what do you want to do?" I took a deep breath, the plan I'd been formulating all night, finally taking shape in words. "I want to sell the house." Thomas's eyebrows shot up. "The whole house? Not just ask them to move out?" "The whole house. Start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere Brandon can't reach me until I'm ready to be reached." Thomas leaned back, studying me. "This is a big decision, Lyle. Where would you go?" Thomas's eyebrows shot up. "The whole house? Not just ask them to move out?" "The whole house. Start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere Brandon can't reach me until I'm ready to be reached." A small smile crossed my lips. "Remember those European vacations Carol and I always talked about but never took because we were saving for Brandon's future? I'm thinking it's finally time. The market is hot right now," he noted. "Houses in your neighborhood are selling above asking price, often with cash offers. With no mortgage, you could walk away with a significant sum. Are you sure about this, Lyle? It's a dramatic step." "I'm sure," I said, and I was. For the first time since Carol died, I felt a sense of purpose, of forward momentum. Brandon made his choice. Now I'm making mine. The next day, while Brandon was at work and Heather was at her salon appointment, I met with Patricia Delgado, a realtor Thomas recommended for her discretion and efficiency. Patricia walked through my home, making notes and taking pictures. "Mr. Harris, this property is exactly what buyers are looking for right now. 4 bedrooms, finished basement, mature landscaping, in an excellent school district. I expect significant interest." "How quickly could it sell?" I asked. "With the current market? We could have offers within days of listing. If you're willing to accept a cash offer, we could close in as little as 2 weeks." "That's perfect," I said. "And Patricia, this needs to remain confidential. My son and his family live with me, but they don't know I'm selling." She gave me a careful look. "The for sale sign would be visible to them." "I understand. But I'd like that sign to go up only after I've accepted an offer. Can we arrange that?" "Of course," she nodded professionally. "It's your property. We can handle this however you're comfortable." Patricia was as good as her word. Within 3 days of quietly listing my home, we had 5 offers, all above asking price. The most attractive came from a foreign executive relocating to the area who was willing to pay cash and close in 10 days. I accepted immediately. While this was happening, I was methodically preparing for my departure. I rented a storage unit where I secretly moved my most treasured possessions: photo albums, Carol's jewelry, family heirlooms, and personal mementos I couldn't bear to lose. I visited my bank and spoke with the manager about liquidating certain investments and transferring funds to an account Brandon couldn't access. I updated my will with Thomas's help, ensuring my grandchildren would be provided for regardless of my relationship with their father. One of the most painful tasks was recording videos for Lily and Jack. I sat in Thomas's study, speaking directly to the camera, telling my grandchildren how much I loved them, explaining in age-appropriate terms that I needed to go away for a while, but that my heart would always be with them. I entrusted the videos to Thomas, to be given to the children if Brandon prevented contact between us. I also spent time researching my destination. Monaco had always fascinated Carol. The tiny principality on the French Riviera, with its beautiful Mediterranean views, temperate climate, and cosmopolitan atmosphere, had been on our dream list for retirement. Now, I would go there alone, but carrying her memory with me. Through an international real estate agency, I found a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment in the Fontvieille district of Monaco. The photos showed a sun-drenched space with a balcony overlooking the Mediterranean, within walking distance of shops and restaurants. The cost was steep, but with the proceeds from my house sale, I could afford it. "Are you sure about Monaco?" Thomas asked when I showed him the listing. "It's pretty far away, and expensive." "That's exactly why it's perfect," I replied. "Far enough that Brandon can't easily follow, expensive enough that he'll know I'm not destitute and in need of his help, and beautiful enough that I might actually find some peace there. The days leading up to my departure were surreal. I went through the motions of daily life in the house, having breakfast with my grandchildren, nodding politely to Heather, exchanging minimal words with Brandon. They noticed nothing amiss, so consumed were they with their own concerns. Brandon continued to work late, coming home only to shower and change, before heading out to another networking event. Heather was deep in planning the renovation, meeting with contractors and designers. Neither paid much attention to my comings and goings, which made my preparations easier. The night before closing on the house sale, I took Lily and Jack out for ice cream, just the three of us. It was a beautiful autumn evening, the leaves turning gold and crimson, the air crisp with the promise of winter. I watched them lick their cones, memorizing their faces, knowing it might be months before I saw them again. "Grandpa, are you sad?" Lily asked suddenly, her intuition startling me. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart? You keep looking at us funny, like you're trying to take a picture with your eyes." I smiled, touched by her perception. "I'm just thinking about how lucky I am to have two such wonderful grandchildren." "Dad says you're going to move to a special home for old people," Jack said, chocolate ice cream rimming his mouth. So, Brandon had already been preparing them. The confirmation strengthened my resolve. "Your dad doesn't always know everything," I said gently, wiping Jack's face with a napkin. "Sometimes people surprise you." When we returned home, I gave each child a small gift. For Lily, a delicate silver locket containing tiny photos of her grandmother and me. For Jack, a compass that had belonged to my father. "These are special treasures," I told them. "Keep them safe, and whenever you look at them, remember how much Grandpa loves you." That night, as I packed the last of my essential belongings into a suitcase I would store in my car trunk until tomorrow, I made a disturbing discovery. While checking that I had all my important documents, I found Brandon's external hard drive mixed in with my papers. It must have been left in the study that was once mine, now converted to a guest room for the impending visit of Heather's parents. Curious, I connected it to my laptop. What I found left me cold. There were folders containing what appeared to be manipulated financial records from Brandon's company, suggesting he had been inflating client returns to earn larger commissions. There were also draft emails to family members, including my sister Sarah, detailing my supposed cognitive decline and making a case for Brandon to take control of my finances for my own protection. Most shocking of all was a folder labeled Dad's Assets, containing detailed lists of everything I owned, from bank accounts to investment portfolios, with notes on how these could potentially be accessed or influenced. There was even a draft of a power of attorney document, ready for my signature, that would give Brandon complete control over my affairs. The extent of the betrayal was breathtaking. This wasn't just about pushing me out of my house. This was a calculated plan to strip me of my autonomy, my dignity, and ultimately my assets. My son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, had been systematically plotting against me. I copied the most damning files to a secure flash drive, then returned the hard drive where I found it. This information was my insurance policy, protection against whatever Brandon might try next. But I hoped I would never need to use it. As I lay in bed that last night in my home, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. Tomorrow, the life I had known for decades would end, but another would begin, one entirely of my own choosing. Brandon had made it clear he was done with me. What he didn't realize was that in doing so, he had set me free. The day of my departure dawned clear and cool. Brandon had left early for a breakfast meeting. Heather was taking the children to school, then heading to a design consultation for the renovation that would now never happen. The house was quiet as I made my final preparations. The closing on the house sale was scheduled for 10 o'clock at Thomas's law office. I arrived early, signing the papers with a sense of finality that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Patricia, the realtor, was there, along with the buyer's attorney and a representative from the title company. "Congratulations, Mr. Harris," Patricia said, as she handed me the closing documents. "The sale is complete. The funds have been wired to your account as requested." Thomas gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze. "Are you sure about this, Lyle? It's not too late to change your mind." I shook my head. "I'm sure." The house stopped feeling like home the moment Brandon told me to leave it. The buyer had agreed to take possession immediately. Unusual in real estate transactions, but made possible by the all-cash deal and expedited closing. Patricia handed over the keys, and just like that, the house where I had raised my son, loved my wife, and built a lifetime of memories belonged to someone else. "When will the sold sign go up?" I asked Patricia. "The sign company will install it this afternoon, around 3, she replied. I explained the situation to them, and they agreed to wait until then. Perfect timing. Brandon would return from work to find not just a for sale sign, but a sold sign on the property he had assumed would someday be his. From Thomas's office, I drove directly to the airport. My flight to Nice, France, was scheduled for 1:30, with a connection in Paris. I would then take a car service to Monaco, arriving late that evening, local time. The international real estate agent had arranged for the keys to my new apartment to be left with the building concierge. Everything was in place for my new beginning. As I waited at the gate, I turned off my phone, knowing that by the time I landed in Europe, Brandon would have discovered what I'd done. The cascade of calls and messages that would surely follow was something I wasn't ready to deal with. Not yet. Not until I was settled in my new life, with the Mediterranean at my doorstep and 3,000 miles between us. The flight was long but comfortable. I had splurged on business class, something Carol and I had always been too frugal to do. As the plane soared over the Atlantic, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was making a choice solely for myself, not considering Brandon's needs or expectations first. "Would you care for champagne, sir?" the flight attendant asked as we reached cruising altitude. "Yes, thank you," I replied, accepting the flute with a smile. I raised it in a silent toast to Carol, wherever she was. We made it, honey. One of us, at least. As I waited at the gate, I turned off my phone, knowing that by the time I landed in Europe, Brandon would have discovered what I'd done. The cascade of calls and messages that would surely follow was something I wasn't ready to deal with. Not yet. Not until I was settled in my new life, with the Mediterranean at my doorstep and 3,000 miles between us. The car service driver was waiting for me, a courteous Frenchman named Marcel who spoke excellent English. "First time to Monaco, monsieur?" he asked as we set off along the coastal road. "First time anywhere in Europe," I admitted. "My wife and I always planned to travel after retirement, but she passed away before we could." Marcel nodded sympathetically. "Then you must make this journey for both of you. Monaco is a special place. Small, but magnificent." The drive along the winding coastal highway was spectacular. The road hugging cliffs that plunged down to the sea, passing through charming villages that clung to the hillsides. As darkness fell, the lights of Monaco appeared in the distance, a glittering jewel set between mountains and sea. "There she is," Marcel said proudly, as if presenting his own hometown, the Principality of Monaco. My new apartment building was modern and elegant, with a uniformed doorman who greeted me in French, then switched to English upon seeing my obvious American confusion. He handed over my keys and helped Marcel bring my luggage up to the 6th-floor apartment. When I opened the door and stepped inside, I caught my breath. The space was even more beautiful than the photos had suggested. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a balcony with a view of the port and the Mediterranean beyond. The furnishings were modern but comfortable, the kitchen small but perfectly equipped. "Will this be satisfactory, monsieur?" the doorman asked with a knowing smile. "More than satisfactory," I replied, still taking it all in. "It's perfect." After they left, I stepped out onto the balcony, breathing in the salt-tinged air. Lights twinkled on boats in the harbor, and in the distance, I could see the famous Monte Carlo casino, illuminated against the night sky. The air was warm, much milder than the autumn chill I had left behind in Pennsylvania. It was nearly midnight local time, but I wasn't tired. Jet lag and the excitement of arrival kept me wide awake. I unpacked the few belongings I had brought with me, arranged Carol's photo on the bedside table, and then opened the bottle of champagne that had been left as a welcome gift in the refrigerator. With glass in hand, I returned to the balcony and watched the nightlife of Monaco unfold below me. Well-dressed couples strolled along the waterfront, superyachts gleamed in the harbor, and the distant sound of music drifted up from a restaurant. It was while standing there, 3 days after leaving my home, that I finally turned my phone back on. The notification sounds were immediate and overwhelming. 37 missed calls, 62 text messages, 23 voicemails, all from Brandon, Heather, and a few from concerned relatives who had obviously been contacted by them. I didn't listen to the voicemails or read the texts. Not yet. Instead, I took a photo of my view and sent it to Thomas with a brief message. "Made it safely. It's even more beautiful than I imagined." Thomas replied almost immediately. "Glad you arrived safely. Everything has hit the fan here, as expected. Brandon is beside himself. Call when you're ready to talk." I put the phone down and returned my attention to the view, to the moment, to the first night of my new life. Brandon was experiencing the consequences of his actions. The reality that his father wasn't the pushover he had assumed, that his plan to gradually take over my life and assets had backfired spectacularly. It wasn't revenge I felt as I sipped champagne on that Monaco balcony. It was liberation. The hurt was still there, the betrayal still raw, but alongside it was a sense of possibility that I hadn't felt in years. As I unpacked my suitcase, I made an unexpected discovery. In my haste, I had accidentally packed Brandon's backup hard drive that I'd found the night before leaving. It must have gotten mixed in with my documents when I was organizing my papers. The evidence of his scheming was now with me in Monaco, 3,000 miles from where he might look for it. I set it aside, not wanting to let Brandon's betrayal cast a shadow over my first night in my new home. There would be time enough to deal with the hard drive and its contents, with the fractured relationship with my son, with all the painful realities I had left behind. For now, on this warm Mediterranean night, with the lights of Monaco twinkling below, and the vast possibility of a new beginning stretching before me, I allowed myself to simply be present, to breathe, to exist in a moment entirely of my own making. I raised my glass once more to the night sky, to Carol's memory, to the unexpected journey that had brought me here. To new beginnings, I whispered, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt the stirring of genuine hope. The first week in Monaco passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. I learned the rhythms of my new neighborhood, found the best cafe for morning coffee, and began to recognize the faces of my neighbors. The concierge, Antoine, took a grandfatherly interest in me, offering advice on everything from the best local markets to which restaurants offered the most authentic Monegasque cuisine. "You must try the barbeguan, Monsieur Harris," he insisted. "It is our national dish, a pastry filled with rice and herbs. Delicious." I was gradually finding my footing in this new world, so different from the suburban Pennsylvania life I had left behind. But the shadow of what had happened with Brandon still loomed. The calls and messages continued, becoming increasingly frantic, and then angry as days passed without response. On my 8th day in Monaco, I finally gathered the courage to listen to the voicemails, starting from the first one Brandon had left upon, discovering the sold sign. "Dad? What the hell is going on? There's a sold sign in front of the house. Call me immediately." His voice was tight, with controlled panic. The messages escalated from there. "Dad, where are you? The realtor says you sold the house. Our house. How could you do this without talking to me? Call me back right now. This is completely irresponsible. You've left us with nowhere to live. We have children. For God's sake. How could you be so selfish?" By the 10th message, the tone had shifted from panic to fury. "You had no right to sell that house. We've been living there for years. We had plans, investments and renovations. You've ruined everything." The later messages became threatening. "My lawyer says what you did could be considered elder self-neglect. We could have you declared incompetent, Dad. Is that what you want? For me to take legal control of your affairs? Because that's where this is heading if you don't call me back." The final messages, from just yesterday, had taken on a different tone altogether, one of desperate pleading. "Dad, please. We don't know if you're safe. We don't know where you are. Just let us know you're okay. Whatever happened, we can work it out. Just call me back, please." I sat on my balcony, the phone heavy in my hand, the ocean stretching endlessly before me. Brandon had gone through all the stages of grief in a week, from denial to anger to bargaining. But there was no hint of understanding or true remorse in any of his messages, only the frantic scrambling of someone whose plans had been unexpectedly derailed. That evening, after careful consideration, I sent Brandon a brief text. "I am safe and well. We'll call tomorrow at 3 p.m., your time." His reply was immediate. "Where are you? We've been worried sick." I didn't respond further, needing time to prepare myself for the conversation that would come. The next day, precisely at 3 in the afternoon Eastern Time, 9 in the evening in Monaco, I called Brandon. He answered on the first ring. "Dad, where are you? What's going on?" "Hello, Brandon," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm somewhere safe, starting a new chapter of my life." "You sold the house. You sold it without telling us. We came home to a sold sign, and all your things gone." "Yes," I said simply. "I sold my house." "Our house," he insisted. "We've been living there for years. You had no right to just sell it out from under us." "I had every right. It was my house, in my name. You moved in temporarily when you needed help, remember? That arrangement clearly wasn't working anymore." "Not working?" His voice rose. "We were taking care of you." "No, Brandon. You were planning to take everything from me. I found the legal documents about adverse possession. I know about the emails to family members claiming I was showing signs of dementia. I saw your notes about my assets. There was a long silence on the other end. Those were just precautions, he finally said, his voice smaller now. In case something happened to you. We both know that's not true. You told me to move out of my own house, Brandon. Did you think I wouldn't? Another silence. Longer this time. Where are you? He asked again. I'm in Monaco, I replied, seeing no reason to hide it now. Monaco? As in Europe? That tiny country near France? The very same. What the hell are you doing in Monaco? Living, I said simply. In a beautiful apartment overlooking the Mediterranean. Something your mother and I always dreamed of doing. I could almost hear his mind racing, calculating, trying to understand the financial implications. How are you affording that? Monaco is one of the most expensive places in the world. The house sold for significantly above what I paid for it 30 years ago. The market was very favorable. That money should have gone to me, he burst out, then immediately seemed to realize how revealing that statement was. I mean, for the family. For your grandchildren's future. My grandchildren will be taken care of, I assured him. I've updated my will. They have trust funds that will mature when they're 25. Funds that neither you nor Heather can access. So what, you're just abandoning your family? Running away to Europe like some retiree cliché? I didn't abandon anyone, Brandon. I was told to leave, and I left. The only difference is that I did it on my terms, not yours. The conversation continued in circles, Brandon alternating between anger, manipulation, and occasional moments of what seemed like genuine confusion. He truly couldn't comprehend how his plans had gone so spectacularly wrong. What about Lily and Jack? He asked eventually, playing his strongest card. Don't you care that they're devastated their grandfather disappeared without saying goodbye? The question stung, as he knew it would. I care very much, and I'd like to maintain a relationship with them, through video calls for now, and perhaps visits in the future. Visits? You expect us to bring the kids to Monaco? Or I could come to the States. But that depends on you, Brandon, on whether you can accept that things have changed, that the future you planned at my expense isn't going to happen. We ended the call with nothing resolved, but at least the silence was broken. I had established contact on my terms, from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. It wasn't a reconciliation. Not yet, but it was a start. Over the following weeks, I settled into life in Monaco. I joined a local chess club, started taking French lessons, and even made a few friends, including a British expatriate named William who had lived in the Principality for 20 years. Most surprisingly, I met Elaine, an American widow in her early 60s who had moved to Monaco after her husband's death 2 years earlier. We met at a concert in the Monaco Opera House and discovered we both loved classical music, good books, and long walks along the coastline. Her warmth and intelligence reminded me of Carol in ways that were comforting rather than painful. It takes courage to start over at our age, she told me one evening as we watched the sunset from my balcony. To leave everything familiar behind and build something new. I'm not sure it was courage so much as necessity, I admitted, telling her the abbreviated version of what had happened with Brandon. Sometimes the most courageous acts are born of necessity, she replied. My relationship with Brandon remained complicated. We spoke weekly, brief, tense conversations that gradually became slightly less combative. He and Heather had been forced to rent an apartment, much smaller than my house, and the financial strain was evident. The renovation plans, the country club membership, the private school for the children, all had to be scaled back or abandoned entirely. I arranged video calls with Lily and Jack every Sunday, treasured moments where I could see their faces, hear about their weeks, and maintain my presence in their lives despite the distance. They were resilient in the way children often are, quickly adapting to the idea of a grandfather who lived in a faraway place with a castle on a hill, their description of Monaco's royal palace, which was visible from my balcony. 3 months after my arrival in Monaco, Brandon called with news that surprised me. I've been let go from my position, he said, his voice flat. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, and I was. Despite everything, I didn't want my son to suffer. What happened? They said some discrepancies were found in client accounts I managed. Nothing illegal, he added quickly, just aggressive interpretations of investment strategies. I thought of the files I'd found on his hard drive, the manipulated returns, but said nothing about them. What will you do now? I don't know, he admitted, and for the first time since our rift began, I heard genuine vulnerability in his voice. The financial services industry is small. Word gets around. I might have to change careers entirely. Perhaps that wouldn't be the worst thing, I suggested gently. a fresh start. The conversation marked a subtle shift in our relationship. Brandon's carefully constructed world of ambition and materialism was crumbling, forcing him to reevaluate the choices that had led to our estrangement. 6 months into my life in Monaco, I received an unexpected email from Brandon. "Dad, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Would it be possible for me to come see you?" Just me, not Heather and the kids. There are things I need to say in person. I agreed, with both hope and trepidation, and 2 weeks later, my son arrived in Monaco. Seeing him walk through the airport terminal, looking both familiar and somehow smaller than I remembered, stirred a complex mix of emotions. Our reunion was awkward at first, neither of us quite knowing how to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. I showed him my apartment, my new life, the beautiful coastline that had become my home. On his second evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the lights of Monte Carlo twinkle in the distance, Brandon finally spoke the words that needed to be said. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said simply. "What I did, what I planned to do, it was unforgivable." I remained silent, letting him continue. "After you left, after everything fell apart, I was so angry. At you, at the world, at everything. But eventually, I had to face the truth. I became someone I never thought I'd be. Greedy. Calculating. Willing to betray my own father for financial gain." "What changed?" I asked. "Losing my job was the wake-up call. But also, Jack asked me something that hit me hard. He said, 'Daddy, why did you make Grandpa so sad that he had to move away?' I had no answer. That didn't make me sound like a monster." He looked out at the view, eyes glistening. "The truth is, I got caught up in a world where status and money seemed like the only measures of success. My colleagues all had bigger houses, more impressive lives. I wanted to compete, to belong in that world. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that the end justified the means. Even if those means included pushing you out of your own home, spreading lies about your mental state, planning to take control of your assets." His honesty was surprising, and I had to admit, affecting. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I don't deserve it. I'm not even asking to be part of your life again if that's not what you want. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did, and I am truly, deeply sorry." We talked long into the night, peeling back layers of hurt, misconception, and damaged trust. Brandon spoke of the pressure he'd felt to succeed, how he'd equated wealth with his worth as a man, as a provider. He talked about the toxic influence of certain colleagues who viewed parents as obstacles to inheritance rather than people to be cherished. "I'm trying to change," he said. "I've started therapy. I'm looking for a different kind of work, something meaningful rather than just lucrative." Heather and I are struggling with the adjustment, to be honest. She married the ambitious financial advisor, not the humbled man I'm trying to become. I told him about my life in Monaco, about Elaine, about the peace I'd found in this unexpected new chapter. I shared how the hurt hadn't disappeared but had evolved into something less raw, less consuming. By the time Brandon returned to the States a week later, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, exactly, not yet, but the beginning of understanding, the foundation for a new kind of relationship built on honesty rather than obligation or manipulation. Over the next year, healing continued in small, significant steps. Brandon found new work with a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for low-income communities, a dramatic departure from his previous career, but one he found surprisingly fulfilling. Heather eventually adjusted to their new lifestyle, though our relationship remained somewhat distant. I established a routine of spending 3 months each year in the States, staying in a rented apartment near Brandon's family, building stronger relationships with my grandchildren. The rest of the year I lived in Monaco, where Elaine and I grew increasingly close, our friendship blossoming into a romance that brought unexpected joy to my life. 2 years after my abrupt departure, I hosted the entire family in Monaco for Christmas. Watching Lily and Jack marvel at the opulent holiday decorations in Monte Carlo, seeing Brandon relaxed and engaged with his children in a way he hadn't been during those tense months in Pennsylvania, I felt the final pieces of a long puzzle falling into place. On Christmas Eve, after the children were asleep, Brandon and I stood on my balcony, the harbor below us gleaming with the lights of decorated yachts. "You know, Dad," he said quietly, "selling the house and leaving was the best thing you could have done, not just for yourself but for me." "How do you figure that?" I asked. It forced me to confront who I was becoming. If you'd stayed, if you'd continued to accommodate my entitlement and greed, I might never have changed course. I might have become someone my children would eventually be ashamed of. I nodded, understanding the truth of his words. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, not just giving endlessly. The irony is, Brandon continued, in trying to take everything from you, I almost lost the things that matter most. My relationship with you, my integrity, the respect of my children. As we stood there, father and son reunited under the star-filled Mediterranean sky, I felt a sense of completion. The journey from betrayal to healing had been long and painful, but necessary. Brandon had learned that true wealth isn't measured in property or possessions. I had learned that standing up for myself wasn't selfish but essential, that my life still held purpose and joy beyond my role as father and grandfather. When Brandon and his family returned to the States after the holidays, our goodbyes were warm, our plans for the future clear. I would continue my life in Monaco with Elaine, who had become an unexpected second chance at love. I would maintain my regular visits to the States. Brandon would bring the children to Monaco each summer, building traditions and memories in this place that had become my sanctuary. The house in Pennsylvania, once the center of so much conflict, now seemed like a distant memory, a chapter closed. In its place was something more valuable, a family relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or exploitation, a hard-won wisdom about the complexities of love and the courage required to start anew, even in the later chapters of life. As I watched their plane take off from Nice airport, Elaine's hand warm in mine, I felt profound gratitude for the painful catalyst that had ultimately led to this moment. My son had told me to move out, not knowing that in doing so, he was setting us both free to find better versions of ourselves, and ultimately, a deeper understanding of what family truly means. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately led to unexpected blessings? I hope my story has touched your heart and perhaps given you courage to stand up for yourself if you're facing similar challenges with family. Please like this video if my journey resonated with you, subscribe to hear more real-life stories of overcoming betrayal, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to start again. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most painful endings can lead to the most beautiful beginnings.